And welcome back to TommoTalks, the topical conversation podcast where this series, Tommo Talks Music. I'm your host, Tommo, and today I'm thrilled to welcome along Dave Ferguson, who is the bass player and backing vocalist from the band Black Orchid Empire out of London, United Kingdom. Black Orchid Empire can be described as a ferocious trio that infuses complex melodies and mammoth riffs to create instantly memorable yet beautiful, vulnerable songs. Black Orchid Empire have also been quoted by the vocalist and guitarist from Skunk Anansie as the band that produces beautiful melodies coupled with tear-off-your-face riffs. They've already released 2 albums, first one in 2016, and they're literally days away from releasing their 3rd album. They've reached a number of milestones, which we're going to cover very soon, but first of all, I just want to welcome along Dave. Welcome along to TommoTalks. It's great to have you with us, mate.
Cheers, Tommo. Good to be here.
How's things going, man? You guys are sort of blowing up right now.
Busy, yeah. It's been fantastic. We've spent a long time putting everything together, and it's this particular album anyway, is the last sort of 2 years of work all culminating together to sort of been produced in one album. But yeah, we're super happy with everything so far, from the recordings to the live stuff, and just the amazing amount of support we've been receiving. It's been really amazing for us.
Right. I mean, there's so much to cover today, so we'll sort of try and get into a little bit. If you can just, for the listeners, sort of just go back to the inception of Black Orchid Empire. I mean, it started with the band at Cape Fear, and I believe I saw you guys. For the listeners, Dave used to organise this party, I suppose you would call it, called Rock on the River, where in London they would hire this boat. And 3 bands would play on it, and you'd basically leave from a place in London and head down the Thames River under all the landmarks that the UK has to offer. And I'm pretty sure I saw Cape Fear playing on that. Is that right?
One band before, actually. It was a band called No Hope Astronaut. That was a 3-piece I was in literally just before I joined Cape Fear. Right. But yeah, that was a wild ride.
yeah, those nights were pretty crazy. Like, how many people did you fit on the boat?
360.
360. So if you can imagine 360 people, and there wasn't a lack of beers flowing, 3 awesome bands every time, and usually about 25 rugby heads, you can sort of picture.
It was pretty nuts. I mean, it was a 3-story boat as well, so that was fun. But nobody fell overboard, nobody died. Success.
Winning. So maybe if you can start off with Cape Fear, give us a quick sort of snapshot on how that evolved, because there is still a few members from Cape Fear in the current lineup and the new band. So just start us off, and then the development through and how you come to be today.
Yeah, sure. So Cape Fear was started by Paul and Billy, the other 2 members of Black Orchid Empire, probably a good 15 years ago now. And that band turned into a 4-piece band with a couple other guys. Didn't quite work out with them. And then they were looking for 2 more members. So that's when I answered an ad, went in for an audition, landed the audition, got in the band with a guitarist called Miki Yasaka, amazing guitarist from Japan. And we were a band together for quite a few years, I think, so 3 or 4 years in total. We did supports for Feeder at the Roundhouse, playing to like 3,000 people, to a festival called Southern Sounds in Clapham, which we were, at the festival there was She Had and In Excess, so some big names there as well. I think that may have even been our last gig as a 4-piece there. Right. And then we decided to change our musical direction, and Mickey left at that point, all completely amicable, of course. We're still good friends, and we became a 3-piece. And things change when you don't have the luxury of a 4th member in the band. Where, for example, for Paul, who's singing and playing guitar, if he needed to do a thing where he just needed to sing, we'd get Mickey to play guitar, and he wouldn't have to do anything. Well, now he's got a job of doing both, all full time. Right. All the time. And equally, myself on bass, there's a lot more there's a lot of extra textures that come from having a rhythm guitarist, where I wouldn't have to do quite so much on the bass. So you lose him as well. That then changes the way you play. So going from a 4 to a 3 changed the way we had to play, therefore changed the music completely. And Cape Fear was a great band, but it was just, in terms of the music, we didn't really feel like it was music that was defining us as artists. And it wasn't quite, it was very close, but it wasn't quite exactly what we were looking to do. And it was quite a ballsy move, really. We literally threw a perfectly good band in the bin and started again, which was difficult, but definitely a good move for us based on where we are right now. And it meant that we were able to write and perform in a way that was, quite well suited to all of us. But we had to make quite a lot of adjustments there. And now we're in the situation we are in with Black Orchid Empire.
Awesome. And I've got to say, so again, for the listeners, to sort of sum up the sound, if you're into Deftones, Queens of the Stone Age, I personally think there's some songs that sound like early Incubus. And again, I've said this to you before, Dave, but you're sort of like, I've stayed away from it. But I think there's some sort of soundings of like Tool and even a Perfect Circle in there. So if that's your sort of genre of sounds, you need to check these guys out. So Black Orchid Empire forms, Cape Fear's gone. Did you feel like you were sort of back at the start as far as trying to get up the pecking order? Because let's face it, trying to play live music in London and the UK, it's not easy. There's a lot of competition, and it's not necessarily who you know either, is it?
No, it's everything. All of the things that you mentioned there. And just on your previous point, it's not that I was turning my nose up at all. It was that particular song we were talking about was more a slightly different band, but we actually draw from many, many influences. So Tool is a heavier influence on all of us. Right. Bands like Deftones, Incubus, Queens of the Stone Age. There's so many influences that we all collectively share. So It's not like we have one member of the band who likes the heavy stuff and one member of the band likes the lighter stuff. We all have very similar interests. And that then forms our sound. So everything seems to be sort of peppered with these little influences rather than, sometimes you hear a band that just sounds like the original band in a modern era.
Right.
That's not what we do. And even within our songs, we're not just a band that sounds a lot like Tool all the time. We have a lot of differences within the songs there. So it's important to take influences from your life growing up as a musician. If everyone didn't do that, then they wouldn't be as good a musician. You have to learn from people before you who are doing it really well.
Exactly.
In terms of the sort of process of trying to make it in a band in London, it's incredibly difficult. There's just thousands and thousands of people doing exactly the same thing that you're trying to do. And breaking through to the next level requires a lot of things. It requires, having amazing music. It requires having an amazing live show. It requires having the desire to sort of put everything on the line and go for it. Requires knowing a few people, getting legs up when you need them, helping other people on the way through as well at the same time, making loads of connections. And it's the sum of all of those parts that doesn't guarantee that you will make it. It guarantees that you'll stand a chance of making it. Because if you don't do one of those things, there's so many other bands that are doing it well. So, why would other people look towards you if you're not covering all those bases?
And I also think, and you've brought this up in conversation as well, it's all about everyone in the band and support crew too, for that matter, being 100% dedicated to the cause. I've played in bands before, albeit cover bands, but if there's one person that's always late to rehearsal, or if there's one person that hasn't learnt their music, it just becomes frustrating, and then it stops any sort of momentum forward, right?
Absolutely. This is the first band I've been in where every single member is exactly as dedicated as the next one. And it's not a bad thing if people aren't as dedicated as each other, because other people have different things going on in their lives. It might be that they have work commitments or what have you. So it's not a bad thing. It just makes it very difficult to make this your full-time earner, your full-time job, your full-time commitment, your full-time passion. And it does mean having to make some sacrifices. And sometimes it's possible to do that, sometimes it's not. And that's it's just a real luxury to have all three of us on the same page. So it makes things move very, very quickly. And also one thing that does help is when we went from a 4-piece down to a 3-piece, any decision, creative or business or otherwise, becomes far easier, because we would find quite a lot of the time 2 of us in the band would agree on one thing, 2 of us would disagree, so it's a stalemate, so nothing happens.
Right.
So when we have a 3-piece, we made a decision very early on. If 2 people agree and you're the person that disagrees, you're just wrong. Doesn't matter whether you're right or whether you're actually wrong, you're wrong.
Just wrong.
And then what happens is you just get stuff done. So, it's more important, even if you're not necessarily moving in the right direction, as long as you're just moving towards the front and keep going and keep excelling at what you're trying to do.
Sure.
Eventually, you'll do it, rather than having loads of discussions about why the second guitar solo was necessary.
And I think that also comes down to chemistry, right? Not just in playing with musicians, but just being able to function as a group, to make business decisions, to make hard calls, etc. If you're totally off page with the other member, it's never going to work. So it's interesting that you came across the two other guys, and you guys have clicked, and you seem to click very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads and loads of bands that don't get on but still become successful. So it's not like it's impossible to do. I mean, you have to look at bands like Fleetwood Mac or the Sex Pistols, or
right.
just
Oasis.
about any big band out there, or Oasis, punch ups.
Yeah.
But then they still go out and they still play shows. They record music. They do what they need to do professionally, but then on the sideline, it's just completely separate.
Right.
But that must be a horrible experience to have to go out and have your job is going to work hating one or more people that stand right next to you every single day.
I can't believe I can't see how anyone could do it, especially if your music is your passion, right? That's your love, and you end up in a situation where you have to go play live. You don't want to even see the guy next to you. So trying to find that on stage sort of connection, again, the chemistry, it must be so difficult. But
yeah, so I don't have to worry about that right now. So.
No, sweet. Okay, it's early days.
Call us back in about 10 years when we're sick of each other.
Okay. Now, listen, you've been a musician for 25 plus years, which is a long time. So let's go back to the start. I always like to ask people that I have a discussion with, do they remember the first time or what it was that sort of grabbed them about music? Because I remember perfectly when it happened for me, and everyone that I sort of spoke to that plays, they can also remember as well, and the feeling that they got. And it's interesting, like when they sort of go back and talk about it, you can see that buzz come over them again. What's your story? Do you remember what happened? Was it a song? Was it a moment? What sort of got you hooked into music?
I actually don't have one, because for as long as I can remember, I've been a musician. I think from about the age of 5, I started learning piano with my grandmother, who was a piano teacher.
Wow.
I moved on to guitar at about the age of 11. I did classical guitar for about 6 years. Went through the grade 7 classical guitar by the time I was about 16 years old. But then got really bored with doing classical guitar. It's not that cool when you've got to have really long nails on one hand and really short nails on another. And fell into playing bass. And have been there since I was about 16, 17 years old, I think.
How does one fall into playing bass?
I got kicked out of my guitar tuition course by my teacher because I wasn't practicing.
Now we get to the truth.
He was perfectly right to do it. He's actually quite annoyed though, because he wanted to kick me out because he's got a long list of people that want to learn how to play guitar. And here's me just turning up every week just going, oh, yeah, I haven't learned my stuff. I'm just this mopey 16-year-old who's sort of starting to get annoyed by classical guitar.
Right.
He got really annoyed because he'd made the decision to get rid of me, but he didn't want to tell me until after I'd done my grade 7 exam, because otherwise it might affect my playing. And I think I passed with distinction, and he was furious. He was like, I don't understand. He doesn't do any practice. He doesn't do anything. And then he goes and passes as well.
Oh, mate, I would have taken that as good tuition.
I just fluked it that day, really. So I got kicked out of that. And then my music teacher said, you're playing bass in the school production at the end of the year. And I went, no, I'm not. I don't like the bass. I really hated it. Yeah. And I did. I hated it with a passion. I didn't understand it, which is why I hated it. I thought it was just the boring version of playing guitar, and I already thought the guitar was boring by this stage.
Right.
This was at the beginning of the school year, and I said, no, I'm not. She said, handed me some music. She said, yeah, you're doing it. So I had to learn 3 songs for the end of school recital type thing. I forgot all about it. And then on the day of the recital, end of year, where there's going to be 300 parents all around, she goes, right, are you ready for this thing today? And I went, what do you mean? She said, well, you're playing bass. I said, I haven't learned how to play the bass. And she said, well, you better hurry up and go and learn. So I spent like a solid 3 or 4 hours during the day, first of all, learning how to read the bass clef properly,
right?
Learning how to play a bass, and then playing in front of 300 people live. And that was my first experience of playing bass in front of people.
And how'd it go?
I absolutely smashed it.
Did you?
Awesome. And it was quite difficult. Like the first piece I had to play was the theme song from the Flintstones.
Oh
That's
my God.
I think I mainly learned it by ear rather than by sight. But it's pretty harrowing. I was sort of sitting on the seat sweating.
I'm sure. It's interesting. So from your grandmother, it was really... Because at 5 years old, you sort of don't really make too many decisions, right? Like, it was just like, okay, Dave, here you go. You're learning this. And then you're into piano.
It wasn't my choice, no.
Right.
It was that's what you're going to do. It didn't really take with me, to be honest with you. but I don't think it was for any other reason aside from, it was just the first thing I tried. I mean, my family is musical on both sides of my family. So my grandmother on my dad's side was a piano teacher. My dad's been heavily involved in theatre, musical theatre and things, and myself, I think on my mother's side, my mum's a jazz singer, and my nana is also a singer. She does barbershop singing and
Wow.
all that sort of stuff. So I'm a third generation. I really escaped it.
Now, did you find though, learning piano at such a young age, did you absorb like reading music, etc.? Did that help you further on when you started playing other instruments?
Yeah, well, I think when you learn something when you're that age, you learn quicker in your brain. So there are still things that I remember from learning piano at that age that I could still do right now. There's a couple of pieces of music I could probably play relatively well. Basic stuff, of course. But it's music is a language. It's like learning French or Spanish or anything really. It uses a different area of your brain, and reading both treble clef and bass clef and learning the coordination that's involved with that, whether it's conscious or subconscious, it's definitely had an impact on me as a musician over the years. If I'd decided at the age of 20 to learn how to play the bass, I wouldn't be as good as I am because I wouldn't have had that early ingrained teaching and knowledge and experience.
Cool. So now you've come across, you've played your first gig, if you like, with in front of all these people that you had 3 hours prep for. How did you then evolve to playing in cover bands and things of that nature?
Well, I was still playing guitar in a band, just a hobby sort of thing at school, and I met up with a guy I knew from school called Anthony Flack, who was heavily into Primus.
Right.
And he was a year older than me. I think he was 17 at the time. And he had built his own 6-string fretless bass.
Oh, wow.
Just so he could play all the Primus licks on it.
Yeah.
And we started a Primus covers band.
Is that right?
I was about 16. I was playing guitar, he was playing bass, and singing, of course, and then the drummer. And we entered a band competition, and I'd only been in the band for 2 weeks by the time we were playing on stage, so I had to learn 4 Primus tracks in a couple of weeks on guitar. So it was a bit harrowing. So everything I do seems to be last minute, it sounds.
Right. But, sounds like it works out for you, though. Good plan.
Yeah, well, that was sort of like heading towards the end of my guitar career, if you want to call it a career. But that's when I started listening to Primus, then I understood what a bass can do as opposed to just being the boring version of a guitar.
Right.
And then I started learning how to play some Primus stuff on bass, and then that sort of started to evolve, and that was kind of when I shifted from guitar all the way through to bass.
Cool. And did you have any, as far as gear, etc. at that point in time, did you sort of resonate to any type of brand of guitar or amps or anything like that, or was it still figuring it out?
I think the first basses I bought were obviously cheap and nasties. Just it is what it is. But when I started to develop into like a working bass player, where I was playing cover gigs at pubs, etc., that's when you start getting paid for your art, and then you can afford to buy the things that you want for your art. And I went through, again, I think it's budget related. You buy the best thing that you can buy for your money, not the thing that you really want. So I went through a phase of everything from Hartkey heads to Ampeg, and I think I've even still got it somewhere, but I had a Marshall bass head as well, and I didn't like any Marshall bass heads, but this one in particular sounded really good. Right. So I used it, and again, it's that combination of gear on behind you, so your amp, your speaker combination with whatever bass you're playing, and then how you play that bass that creates that sound in total. But to be honest with you, I have a couple of rigs I hate. Galen Kruger or Trace Elliott just don't get on well with me.
Is that right?
They work with people. I just don't like the sound. It's a personal preference.
Right.
They're fairly well known in the industry, and loads of big artists use them, but it's just not for me. So,
do you know the story behind? You probably do Ashdown bass heads and bass rigs.
Again, they're not one of my favourites, but I don't know. I think certain heads and certain gear have the grunts that I require, and I'm not talking about the ampage or any of that sort of stuff. But when I hit a bass, I want it to do a certain thing, and it has to have a lot of energy in the sound, and that's just not distortion. It's an energy.
Right.
Different. I don't know if you can tell over the microphone, but it's absolutely just gone torrential outside here.
Is that rain? Is it?
That's rain, so I don't know if you can hear that.
I can definitely hear it. I actually thought that you must have been near a highway or something, because I was thinking, God damn, that's rain.
And that was lightning.
Right.
Yeah, so if I start to float away in a second, that'll be fine.
Good old UK, mate. It's always raining. Hey?
It was sunny earlier.
Well, 4 seasons in one day there, mate. So for all the listeners, that noise you can hear in the background, that is definitely rain. So just bear with it. That's okay.
Difficulties.
Now,
you know, I don't know what it is that it is about it, but when you're hitting something quite hard, you want to be able to hear it come back quite hard. You're not loud, but quite hard with energy and force. And some rigs do it for me, some don't. It's just as simple as that.
Right. I used to play Gillian Krieger and Music Man because Flea was a very, very sort of influential player on me as well. But I did grow out of the Gillian Krieger rigs. I actually use a rig now, so I've got Ashdown cabinets. The company's been closed down now. I believe Fender bought it and shut them down. They were called Gens Benz. Yeah. Just a real tiny little head. It's ridiculous, but it's brilliant, and it's tube driven as well. And for what I do, I can get out some really, really great sounds. So that's my bit. Now I don't know if you remember this. You playing cover bands in Napier. Before I got to meet you in the UK, I'd actually seen you before. Do you remember this story?
Maybe.
So
I don't know what story you're about to tell me.
So it's all good. It's all good. It's fine. I don't know, mate, we were in the UK somewhere, we're having beers, and then you told me originally from Napier, and I was like, hey, do you know this bar? And you were like, yeah. And I said, oh man, I used to see this wicked, whenever I used to get into Napier, I used to see this wicked band, and I said the name, and you'll go, I was the bass player in that band, and that was Stonehenge.
Yeah, Stonehenge, yeah. I do remember the conversation now, and there was definitely over beers. That was a legendary band.
It was crazy good.
I mean, we were a covers band in Napier, and we would regularly pull 300 people every time we played.
Right.
It's quite nuts. And it was very much a old school, Black Sabbath, AC/DC, that sort of stuff, peppered with some of the more recent tracks of the day, which would have been. When we were playing, it would have been around about the 2000s, so probably somewhere around the 97 to 97, 98 for about 4 years. I was in that band, I think. Yeah,
so there was Soundgarden tracks, there was Pearl Jam tracks, there was Nirvana. But I just remember your vocalist, man. He had super, super long hair, looked a little bit like Robert Plant, and crikey, could he sing, man? Like he
could sing like Robert Plant as
absolutely.
We did Immigrant Song. And a couple others, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's just got that really high. I'm not even going to attempt it. High note.
Go on. That'll be great.
That's not going to happen. So.
All right.
But yeah, he had that as well as all the AC/DC stuff, which is, I mean, all these bands from way back in the day just sang really, really high. Not just screaming, but the notes were just very, very tough to hit.
Yeah.
I think we actually cheated slightly, and most of the time we were tuned down by half a step, so you could give them the room to actually get it.
Right.
Because if you can get it on a day where you're good, that's fine. But on a day where you're not quite so good, if you can't quite nail it, there's no alternative. You can't hit a different note in Immigrant Song.
Right.
It's just not a thing. And those days, the covers gigs we were doing 4-hour shows. So it was a lot of effort. You play 4 45-minute sets.
Mm-hmm.
You're playing 40, 50 tracks a night. It's hard going, and it's like 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. on a Thursday night, and you've got to go to work the next day.
Right.
It's pretty tough.
It is, yeah.
But yeah, that was awesome. It was probably the most rock and roll band I've ever been in, I think.
Yeah, I saw you guys 2-3 times, I think. I had a friend that they owned the bar that used to play in, actually. That's why I used to go down there. And it was just ironic that like 15 years later I run into this dude and we start having beers, and I was like, holy shit, I've seen you play before. So let's talk about... so before you went to London, What made you think about going to London? Like a lot of Kiwis do our OE or our overseas adventure, right? So it's like, oh, let's go check out the motherland, because if you go back through generations, most of us, that's where we come from, be it England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. What was your plan with heading to London? Was it all about music? Was it your OE? And sort of walk us through that process until you left.
Well, in my former life, I was a travel agent. So I did quite a lot of traveling as part of my job. So having this big experience by going traveling didn't actually really appeal to me that much, because I got to do it as part of my job regularly, and every day was sort of my experience in travel. So although once I was over here, it was great to do those things, that was never my initial intention or desire to do it. And it was kind of actually like a spur of the moment decision, really, to do it. I was in a band called Gramsci in New Zealand. It was a sort of acoustic rock-ish, but a bit more complex than that. And we'd just done a tour with Anika Moa, so we supported her around New Zealand. We did 30 dates with her. It was an amazing tour.
Great artist, by the way.
Yeah, she's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And our singer Paul, it's basically his band, Paul McClaney, he had decided he was going to go to a stint over in the UK. And myself and drummer Cam, we decided that we were just going to tag along and sort of go for the experience type thing. And we didn't really have much of a plan, to be honest. We probably should have had more of a plan, but we didn't have much of a plan. And the whole thing kind of, in terms of the three of us, kind of disintegrated, and not in a bad way or anything like that, but we just had decided to do different things. Cam decided he wanted to go back to New Zealand. Paul stayed on, and I stayed on. But it was a tough old time because we didn't have a plan, and things had changed on us at the last minute. We ended up just sort of more on survival mode than this is a great experience.
Right.
It was absolutely amazing time that I had in the first 6 months I was over here, and also met my now wife in that time as well. So it obviously has amazing benefits there.
Yeah.
But it was a unique experience, but there wasn't a lot of music that happened in that 6 month period. All of the music stuff happened when I sort of came back to New Zealand, got my proper visas and everything, and then went back and sort of haven't really left since then. And that's when I've been forging my musical career over here.
Right.
But the band Gramsci led me to come over here in the first place. But yeah, we were sort of going to go and take on the world, because we were on a bit of a self high at the time. And yeah, it was really good fun. Really enjoyed it. Loads of people also from Napier and other places in New Zealand, which I already knew, were over in the UK.
Right.
In fact, I got duped a little bit, because I already knew about 5 or 6 people that I could go and stay with. And they're like, yeah, you can stay on my couch. You can stay on my couch.
Dirty Dosser.
Then I found out that 5 of them lived in the same house. So I didn't actually have that many places to stay when I finally got over here. But everyone was really kind and helped me out through it.
I found that as well. So because you were a travel agent, had you been to London before, or like when you landed in London, was that the first time?
I'd actually been to London once before, but I'd been for a day.
Okay.
I did an educational trip which went around Europe. So we sort of did a day in 6 different countries in Europe and then flew back again. So wasn't really much of an experience. Get there, take a photo of Buckingham Palace, and bugger off to the next flight.
Do you remember though, like the first time you landed at Heathrow and looking out the window? What went through your mind? Because I had a panic attack, man. It was overwhelming, because New Zealand, you go to Auckland and there's like 3 skyscrapers that are like 4 or 5 stories high, and there's green everywhere. And I remember coming into Heathrow, landing, looking out the window, and I started to shake, because you can just see brick into the horizon, right? Like there's no grass or very little. You got Hyde Park or what have you, but mate, I was bricks. Did you have the same experience, or were you more chilled out?
I was more chilled out at that point. I think it was sort of probably slightly overwhelming a little bit, but more on the tube, actually, because the tube was an experience that I hadn't really had before. And we were staying in King's Cross, so we basically took the Piccadilly line all the way from Heathrow all the way to King's Cross, which is another hour on top of the day that you just spend on a tube or something else. Right. But just going on the Piccadilly line was great, because you'd be underground, and then all of a sudden you come out, and then you're just actually on the ground level of London.
Right.
And that was quite interesting to me, just sort of looking out the window and just sort of seeing what's going on, because it just goes on forever.
Yeah. Oh, mate, I've been victim to the old Piccadilly line. When I first moved there, I was living in Acton Town, and I was working in a nightclub that closed at 3, but the tube stations didn't open until 6 from memory. So we would have beers, right? And then there was one time in particular, I jumped on the tube, and you know what it's like, man. It's warm, and it's like clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety, and I just sort of fall asleep on shit. And I woke up in Heathrow. Not only had my beer gone, but my ticket as well. So I bought the ticket I had in my hand. So some bugger stole my beer and my ticket. So when I got back to Acton Town, I had to pay to get out of the tube because they thought that I jumped the bloody... So, yeah, good times, man. Too many beers in the tubing.
Probably just looked dodgy as well.
What's that?
You probably look dodgy as well.
Yeah, dodgy as hell, mate. And like, don't we stick out like dog's balls when we first get over there? Do you know what I mean? Green as, and you know, that whole fresh off the boat syndrome. It's a thing, right? It's a thing.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to spot. If it's like 5 degrees outside and it's winter, anyone in shorts is from New Zealand, pretty much. So.
Right. Yeah. So, okay, so let's get back. So you get back into the UK. You've sort of got yourself settled. You start playing in some good bands. Obviously, you start meeting some good connections. And how long was it from sort of settling down to sort of getting to bands that are sort of gaining some momentum and then leading to Cape Fear? What was that sort of time period?
Yeah, sure. So that wasn't actually too long, to be honest with you. It was probably within about the first four years that I was there. Well, slightly earlier than that, in fact. I think around about 2000. I arrived here 2003, and I think in 2005 I did my first trip over to the States with a band. It was for a singer called Anushka De Giorgio, and she was being filmed by Channel 4, I think it was, as part of a collective of people going over and trying to break into the US.
Right.
So we got put up in a mansion in Beverly Hills and stayed there and played a gig. Actually, unbeknownst to us, played a gig with Wolf Mother. And that was just like this little showcase thing. And I was like, oh, they sound a bit like Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin. Yeah, they're kind of cool.
Right.
And then we actually went back a year later to do a recording over there, and they were on a big billboard. Right. And Anushka said, "Oh, remember those guys?" I said, "What do you mean, remember those guys?" And she said, "Well, we played with them at the gig last year." I was like, "No, it's Wolf Mother. You know, we didn't play with them." And she said, "Yes, we did." And I went, "Oh yeah, we did." I remember now. So that was probably the first sort of thing I did that sort of was more than just playing the toilet circuit around London.
Right.
And I was in that band for a little bit. And then Anushka's still over in the States at the moment. She's been there for a number of years. Really good experience. And it was sort of around the same time as I jumped back into the No-Hope Astronaut model and then into the Cape Fear from there. But I think that was all sort of happening in the first 4 years of being over here.
Right, so relatively quickly. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, you are one that's very into your gear, and you got some awesome bass equipment that sort of want to talk about. There is if for the listeners, if you need to head to YouTube and go and just search Black Orchid Empire, and there is a live track of them at the Teddy Rocks Festival. Was that last year?
Year before, I think now.
Year before? 2000. What are we now?
Yeah.
2020. Okay, so...
I think it was 2018, yeah.
Right. It's so 3-piece. We all know that it can't be as big as a 6-piece band as sound-wise, etc. But you'll be blown away by what these guys can put out. And this live version of the song, My Favorite Stranger, that's filmed at this particular festival, check it out. It's brilliant. And we spoke before we started recording about your bass sound, because I just love the growling rumble, but also clarity of your bass sound. And you were telling me that you don't usually use a bass rig per se anymore. Can you just talk us through the bass rigs you got to? Like you mentioned, you didn't like the sound of Gillian Kruger. Your setup now, the reasons why you moved away from a bass rig per se, was it because you couldn't find a tone that you liked, a sound that you liked, or was it because this is more efficient? And just talk us through that sort of whole switching over to having a bass rig to what you use now.
Yeah, sure. So before I used the gear that I'm using at the moment, I had a full orange rig. So I had an 8x10 cab, which weighed about 80 kilos, fully flight cased. So there's a logistical issue with that whenever you got to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And an orange head. And it's an amazing sound, and it actually forms the basis of what I use right now. And I decided, along with Paul and the band, that we were going to switch to an amp modeling system called Kemper. Which essentially learns the sounds that you have and turns it into and replicates it. probably to about 95% of the same sort of quality.
Right.
You then have options to amend the sound. You can add pedals in, within the Kemper rig itself, rather than physical pedals. So you can add extra gain, distortion. You can add change the EQ. You can add compression, all sorts of things, octavers. And so what you do is you mic up your existing rig, and the Kemper then learns that through a mic, and it puts out like a spectral sound. So it's understanding what the frequencies are doing once it's done that. And once it's learned that, it's effectively replicated the sound of your rig. And from there, it just gives you the opportunity to tweak it even further. In addition, you can do other things, which, for example, you can put in a USB key, download it to that USB key, go to another country, hire a Kemper over there, plug in your USB key, and you have your rig.
Wow.
So there's a lot of positives for that. You can also create your own sound, upload it to the internet. Various forums have people that sell those. You can download. There are people that have replicated Deftones sound, for example, and you can download that and put it straight on USB key and straight into the Kemper, and you've got the tone that was on whatever record that they were trying to model on.
That is crazy.
So it became the sort of way that the future was going to be of actually having guitar amps, because it's quite difficult when you're in a different venue. A different size rig is going to do a different thing, so you're constantly sort of changing things. Plus we run in-ears as well. So we most of the time we don't actually run a cab on stage at all, so the whole thing is just going straight to monitoring in-ears, and the flexibility that we get with this is far superior, really. And because you're not running a cab, you can have your microphones, in terms of the singing, up a lot louder, because you don't have much stage bleed that's coming through from guitar amps and bass rigs. So you don't have that thing where you're at a gig when the feedback's just going like that, because the sound guy's just trying to get a little bit more out of it, because everything's too loud on stage. And guitarists and bass players usually crank it up anyway, so they're always too loud on stage. They'll do a sound check, and then they go, everything's all good, and just put everything away. Just give it an extra nudge, which is pretty standard. But yeah, so the Kemper model, we have our own recording studio, so we were able to use really good gear to model it, through decent preamp, decent mic, through a dark glass pedal, which is a lot of the sound that you're talking about with the growl, the clarity, the depth, that comes from the dark glass preamp. And yeah, that's kind of the backline rig. On the frontline part of it is equally as important. So I've now got two Dingwall basses, which is a fan fret. So it's not your standard straight up and down frets. They actually fan apart the way that your hand naturally moves, which is a new learning experience when you've played traditional straight fret for your entire life. But as soon as you learn it, it's amazing. It's just crazy. A friend of mine said, just don't look down, because if you look down, all the frets are like that, going in the opposite direction. So you just have to sort of feel it a bit more. Well,
I remember when you first switched over, because you were a Music Man for a long time, weren't you? And I remember when you switched over, and I think I sent you a message saying, man, I get it, but I was a bit the Music Man, because I'm a Music Man lover as well. But I got to say, man, like that new setup you've got, and that guitar just sounds absolutely wonderful. It's so good. But that was going to be one of my questions, because of the frets the way they are. Like, how long did it take you to sort of feel comfortable with playing with that?
About 3 hours.
Oh, Jesus, you in 3 hours, mate.
No, well, part of the reason for the change of bass wasn't just because of want to try the Dingwall. I actually had a problem with my Music Man and my wedding ring, because I'm obviously hitting everything quite hard and doing lots of slides and everything. One day in rehearsal, I did this massive slide on the neck, and I went, looked down, and I had a 1-inch splinter through my little finger.
Oh, you're
just gone
serious?
Straight through and through. It was about that long, and I was like, right. And what had happened is my ring had been sort of slowly over time degrading the fretboard, and a piece must have just gone up like that. And as I went boom like that, it went straight through.
Oh my God!
I was just like, it's nuts. Right. So I pulled that out and went, okay, that sucks. And I thought it was going to be a one-off. And then about 2 weeks later, it happened again. I was like, right, I'll put that down. I need the bass. I can't do this anymore. And for about a month, I had no confidence in doing any slides on any bass whatsoever, because you just get speared.
Right.
So that was I loved Music Man. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't that.
Yep.
But moving to Dingwall, it's just a different beast. The neck is so much thinner. The whole bass is so much lighter. It's got a dark glass preamp built into the pickups, and the fan fret thing makes it possible so your low B string, it's actually a longer scale length.
Right.
So when you hit it, it doesn't go wow like that because it's shorter. It actually sits in there, and that punch of not changing a note is part of the reason it's so tight when you throw it through everything else that's going on. So by having a really well intonated, really well tuned guitar that doesn't go out of tune and doesn't sort of vary, and with Paul also on an Evertune bridge, which is a completely locked bridge where it doesn't even matter if you stretch your strings, it stays completely in tune. When we play the same note together and it's perfectly in tune, it sounds huge, which is why you were talking before about how can that three-piece sound that big. It's because we've tightened all these other elements. If you play two notes, like one on a bass and one on a guitar, and they're slightly out of tune, even if you hit them at the same time, it won't sound anywhere near as powerful as if they're perfectly in tune and they hit at the same time, and that's how it's presented. So the sound itself comes from a number of different avenues, from the playing to the performance to the instrument through to whatever rig is behind you,
right?
And then obviously how it's then going to sound out the front.
Of course. And so you got two Dingwalls, correct?
Yeah, I've got Combustion 5, and I've got the Nolly Signature NG2, which is the yellow one, which I've called Bumble, yeah. Well, incidentally, we're really lucky that you've shared a video with us, so stand by. You're going to see Dave play through the new single, Natural Selection, which is due to drop. How long? This is recorded on the 6th of June. When is the album dropping? So the album's dropping on the 12th of June.
Okay.
Natural Selection actually dropped a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
It was already amazing on Spotify. I think we're already hitting about 30,000 plays just on that one track already.
Yep.
But yeah, so we've got one more single to come out, which is called Singularity, which is coming out on the 12th of June, along with the rest of the album called Semaphore. And that's hitting Friday the 12th everywhere.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll stand by. We're going to switch over to the video now and watch Dave play along to the new single, Natural Selection. So there you go. There's Bumblebee, as you call it. Obviously, I'm guessing, I could be wrong, is that because of Transformers by any chance? Bumblebee, the car, the...
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
it's just it's affectionately known as Bumbles, really.
Bumbles. Okay. Mate, it's you got to I got to admit, like looking at it and just watching that video, it's a beautiful looking piece of kit. Yeah, like the craftsmanship looks absolutely amazing. And you were saying that the other one has a built-in preamp, is that right?
They both have preamps built in with
Right.
the model on the Dark Glass, which is just an amazing sound. I've also got a Dark Glass pedal, but I don't no longer have to use that because we've basically built the rig to not require that. So I literally just have my bass straight into my Kemper foot switch, which I have 5 different tones ranging from very clean through to very dirty or gamey, if you like. And you know, it depends on what stage of a song I'm in, whether it's a quiet chorus. Sometimes it's just me and the drummer, so I'm still on a really loud patch or a sort of heavily gained patch.
Yeah.
But the patch number 5 is actually a special patch where it's only ever used for when Paul goes and plays a guitar solo. As a 3-piece, when a guitar solo happens, you lose all of the rhythm guitar. So if you see a lot of 3-pieces play, when a guitar solo happens, the song sort of drops on one side.
Right.
To balance that, my rig then adds an octaver. It adds extra distortion and extra high end, because those are the things that you lose when the rhythm guitar goes away. And although it doesn't completely replace it, it helps make that drop not quite so much and keeps the balance up as much as possible. And then obviously sometimes I will play differently. I might play octaves instead of single notes so that it fills out the sound a bit more. But then when it comes back in again, I'll go back to single notes so that we're never having this sort of big dynamic shift in the wrong direction where there's too much production going on or not enough production going on. If you will.
Now, obviously, with a great bass sound and a great bass player, it's all sort of pivotal on a great drummer. And let's just talk about Billy Freedom for a second. Like, he's super solid. I think his name should be
not from this earth.
No, you're right, and I think his name should be Badass Billy Freedom, because like when he looks like a sort of no nonsense type of guy, mate. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously I've never met him, but I don't know if I'd like to meet him down a dark alley when he was pissed off. Like, he looks like a bit of a hard man. Is that what he's like, or is he a gentle soul? What's he like?
He's both. It depends what you've done to him.
You've answered my question.
He's an amazing guy and absolute heart of gold.
Yeah.
But when he's behind the drums, he's a different beast. You know, he literally goes out there to win at drumming.
Yeah, and he does it.
Competition.
Yeah, his touch is just really nice. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of guys out there that just beat the living hell out of their heads and that, but he's just got a really nice touch, and he's very flowy too. It's sort of like watching someone do Tai Chi almost.
We call him. What is he doing? He's doing the swan, and a swan is basically a little graceful up top, but the legs are going like this underneath to try and keep going. That's kind of what he's doing, and it doesn't mean that he's just doing all feet stuff.
No.
It's actually he plays what looks like a very simple thing, but what you don't realize is he's playing 3 different time signatures on different limbs at the same time.
Right.
And it's just a crazy amount of calculations that are going on in a drummer's head when they're playing regularly.
Yeah.
But we always keep pushing him and testing him and just getting him to play sort of ridiculous stuff. So we'll create a riff that's in like 6 and 7, and then we'll get him to learn it and say, right, now let's drop another beat or add another one in. So we play around with that quite a bit.
Right.
And then he'll finally get it, and then we go, right, now just add the hi-hat.
Right. That's awesome.
So that's the Billy Freedom you don't want to mess with. That look when you say, can you just add the hi-hat in? Yeah. He's already going, what?
Right. Give me a little bit more. No, not today. And listen, like, you guys are a solid rhythm section, and I think that's partly, the reason why you guys are doing so well. So congrats on that, man. Like, it's a joy to watch you guys, and again, like, if you're not watching what's going on, if you're just watching if you've got the live stuff playing in the background, it's hard to think that you guys are a 3-piece. Of course, we can't not mention Paul Visser, the guitarist and vocalist of Black Orchid Empire. Super silky smooth vocals, but also very, very raw. He's just a great all-round musician, isn't he?
Yeah, he's annoyingly talented, I think is the best way of describing him.
Right.
The stuff that we do is super technical, but not in an obvious technical way. So we're not just trying to make riffs that make you do a backwards head nod or go, what the hell's going on here? It's still got to have a groove, it's still got to have feeling, and it's still got to have that sort of sense of this is a cool riff. rather than I'm confused by this riff, therefore it must be cool. And on top of that, we try and make sure that we're always maintaining an element of sort of pop melodies rather than just screamo for the sake of screamo.
Right.
So there's musicality in everything we do. Occasionally, it requires a big screamy vocal to sort of push the point home. But on the whole, it's about having really accessible lyrics because, let's face it, irrespective of bass, drums, and guitar, the thing that's listened to the most out of any song is a lyric in the melody.
Of course.
So they have to be accessible for everyone, and it needs to be hooky. And you can do that in tricky ways. You can just be straight up and down belligerent in terms of in your face. Here's a riff, or here's a melody hook line.
Right.
And either way, he sort of covers that in terms of the difficult riff coupled with the difficult vocal line over the top of it. I mean, we both have the same sort of issues there because I'm doing a lot of backing vocals, he's doing a lot of main vocals. We're both playing difficult stuff on bass and guitar. And I think that is that competition, if that's the right word to use, makes it possible to play all these things because every other band I've been in, there would have been an opportunity. If it gets too hard to do it, then why are you trying it? Just play it a different way.
Right.
And it's not that it's too hard, it's just we haven't learned it yet.
Right.
So we don't let each other off. And that goes for all three of us. If someone goes, I don't think I can play that, it's like, well, just keep going because you're going to play it. You don't have a choice here.
And that's one thing I wanted to mention too. In the intro, I mentioned that you were a bass player / backing vocalist, but it's not the typical backing vocalist. Like you sing a lot, right? Like you guys sing a lot of harmonies together, and again, that just makes your sound so unique. And you guys are always bang on. So, was that when you went into it? Was that sort of a objective to sound like that, or did you just started singing BVs and was like, oh man, that sounds good. Let's do some more and more and more. How did that evolve?
Well, I don't class myself as a great singer. I class myself as a BV singer that can get by, first of all. When I first started backing vocals was actually in Stonehenge. And the reason I started doing those is because we needed a backing vocalist. And our drummer could sing but couldn't afford a microphone. Our guitarist couldn't sing, but he could afford a microphone. And I could kind of sing and kind of afford a microphone. So I was the one that was tasked with that particular job. So it was from that point forward that I became an actual backing vocalist.
Right.
But the beauty with backing vocals, it's another instrument. So, well, there's three of us. We're actually a 5-piece band. It's bass, drums, guitar, vocal, BV.
Right.
And you talk about the big sound. It comes in many fashions. It comes from all the things we've already described before, but also the fact that we have the ability to do complex vocal melody and harmony parts that then fill the space that maybe a synth player or the extra guitarist would play in those lines. It's hard work because it's a lot to concentrate on, and you're running around the stage, you're trying to be high energy and then come back and sing some tricky melody over a 7/8 riff, and
right.
Right. Unless you've really got your chops down, it can be quite daunting.
Exactly.
But it adds an extra dimension, and I've always kind of done it, but we really focused on it quite hard in the early stages of Black Orchid Empire. Cape Fear, I did a bit of it, but I think there were about a couple of months there with Paul and I will actually have a separate rehearsal every week for about 4 hours, just working on harmonies and just getting the parts laid down. Right. And now it's to a point where it's not just about the parts, but like even live, if he's doing a long note and I'm doing a long note and he cuts off early, I can predict what's going on there because it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you're both starting and finishing at the same time.
Correct.
And everything locks in together. And that's something you learn from performing with somebody for a long time, and sort of reading how it sounds, how it looks, what's going on.
And it's also interesting, little things like that you just mentioned, making sure if we start together, we finish together. That makes a good band to an awesome band. The little fine details, right? It's like getting a finishing sandpaper on a nice piece of artwork and just finishing that little piece off.
Yeah, well, we're not a band that changed something 100% and we can a better band. We've changed 100 things 1%.
Right.
That's the best way to describe it. We look for any potential weaknesses in what we do, and then we fix that particular weakness and then move on to the next thing. And that could be anything from I can't sing that note to this riff is too hard, or this time signature is just too tricky to get through. And we just continually work on it until we get it right. And when you find that the kick drum locks in with the bass locks in with the guitar, the vocals all lock in together, and then as a band we all lock in together, that coupled with having all of the great sounds that we got on stage, and then the performance, the sum of all of those parts means that it sounds good. And it also gives a little bit of leeway if something doesn't quite lock in perfectly. Well, you still got a lot of support behind you to sort of see it through as well.
Brilliant. So over the last sort of month or so, there's been a couple of milestones that I've seen happen. One being the Spotify streams, also the American booking agent. Do you just want to sort of give us a sort of bit of an update on that?
Yeah, well, the 1 million streams is just a phenomenal figure, really, for us. I mean, our first record, I think, still only has about 80,000 streams on it in total, and it was released back in 2016 under our own steam. We signed with Long Branch Records in 2018 for our second record, and they've been sort of instrumental in helping, along with lots of other people, of course, but they've been instrumental in getting us out to larger playlists, wider audiences. They're based in Germany, so we did a German tour there. We're actually going back to Germany in February next year as well. So it's about sort of casting a wider net, and doing it with the right sort of contacts and influences in this particular genre of the industry. We've also got a fantastic manager, James from Saviour Management. He's been instrumental in everything that we've been doing as well, and that all works towards us getting played to more people, and therefore more people are saving us in playlists, playing us to their friends.
Right.
And 1 million streams is just it's a huge amount. Really,
it's a great milestone. 1 million streams on Spotify. That's amazing. And then can you just sort of talk about the US booking agent? That sort of happened over the last couple of weeks. Well, I'm sure that's been in the works for a while, but you officially sort of let that out?
Yeah, I mean, so we just signed in the UK with TKO for our bookings, and that's the guy called Ian Shaw. And we've been sort of in and around the radar with Ian for a while. We've done a couple of shows with him up in Birmingham. He's also a promoter as well as a booking agent. So we've been sort of in and around things. And I think he sort of took a liking to some of the new stuff we've been doing with the Semaphore record, and decided to take us on for UK and Europe bookings.
Right.
And then I think he played us to Andrew Goodfriend over in the States, who's I think one of the founders of TKO, and he looks after bands like Anthrax and Disturbed and Carnival. And he liked what he heard from us, so he was like, "Yeah, bring him on board over here as well." So that part of it is super new. I think we would have had more news if we went all in lockdown and nobody knows what's going on.
Mate, yeah.
So it's a wait and see sort of thing, what's going on there. But he's keen to get us over to the US, do some support tours over there, do some festivals over there, and we're just super keen to love to go and play big festivals over in the States. It'd be amazing.
Mate, it could be a game changer for you. Do you know what I mean? Like that could be the next sort of level, and it's just such a nightmare with what's going on. So as far as like all shows for 2020, have you got nothing planned? I imagine everything's been pretty much cancelled as far as festivals and everything.
Well, everyone's lost the summer, I think, is what's happened. Yeah. So we packed it all in March, and I would doubt whether there's a significant concert that happens before September.
Right.
At the very earliest, probably October. We've got some dates booked in for October. We're playing Radar Fest on the 16th, I think. And then we've got 4 or 5 dates around the UK with a band called Exist Immortal. Mm-hmm. We're doing a co-headline tour with them towards the end of October. I think those are probably safe-ish, if you can say that.
Right.
But I mean, it's all up in the air. And then our next set of dates is going to be February for Germany.
Right. Brilliant. Now, just getting sort of towards the end, if there was 2 things that you could say, someone listens to this or sees this or what have you, that may be someone that's just starting to play bass, or maybe he's been in playing for 4 or 5 years and sort of thinking about the original music thing, what are the 2 key things from what you've learned? Because I'm sure there's been a lot of like, we all have our little wins, but we also sometimes have a lot of fails too. It's just part of life and whatever we do. So from all those experiences of where you're going, damn, I probably didn't do that too well. What are 2 things that stand out to you that you could pass on to other musicians coming up through the ranks?
Yeah, sure. So the first mistake most people make is they think if they write a really cool song, it's enough to get them signed. It's just the biggest mistake that pretty much everyone makes. Because on the face of it, people see great music as the reason people get signed. It's actually about 10% to do with that and about 90% to do with everything else.
Right.
And unless you can fill in all the gaps, so if you imagine you've got a checklist of things you've got to do in order to get onto somebody's shortlist to be signed, They are things like have amazing, well-recorded original music, have an engaged fan base, big social media numbers, touring schedule, some great music videos, some great live videos. Unless you can tick all those boxes, any label worth their salt isn't even going to touch you, because there's already a pile of 100 other bands that are already doing that. So just to make it into that pile, you've got to cover all those bases. You're not going to get in there just with a great song.
Right.
They'll go, great song, come back to us when you're a bit more of a better proposition, because at the end of the day, it's a Dragon's Den thing. You're turning up to Dragon's Den and saying, I've got this really great song. And they go, right, show me how I'm going to make my money back from this. You go, but it's a really good song.
Right.
And they go, show me the money. And if you can't, then I'll see the next guy that's coming in. So
right.
That's probably one of the biggest mistakes people make. And it's that sort of X Factor generation where people think if they're a good singer, they can make it. And that's because 5 people have done it over the whole course of X Factor. And the only person who's really won out of that is Simon Cowell. So it still doesn't work. And in terms of anything else, I mean, for me, I think the most valuable thing for me as a bass player is I played in every single band I could. I played in 20-piece jazz orchestras. I played banjo in a Dixieland band. I played guitar in Lema's stage shows. I played in rock bands. I played in acoustic bands. I just played in every opportunity I could do it. I mean, I think at one point I was, as I said, I was a travel agent. I was working 6 days a week, and I was playing 7 days a week in bands as well. And sometimes that was every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, playing from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. and then going to work the next day. So it's that sort of hard graft, I think, which has done quite a lot for me over the years. But you just learn different influences. I mean, you can't just play one genre and say that's really good. I apply lots of things, from things I learned in classical guitar to the way they play bass, to things I've learned in, just watching and being around other people and the way that different music affects other people. You've got to really immerse yourself in absolutely everything to get a broad understanding of everything, and then decide which bits to cherry pick to make your own sound.
Right. Yeah, and it's undeniable though that it's just hard graft, right? Like a lot of people seem to think that, I pick up like you said, I pick up a guitar for a couple of years, I write a 3-chord song, it's amazing, but it's not about that. It's all about the time that's gone on for you since you're 5 years old, right?
Yeah.
To now. So everything that you've done along your journey is basically the reason why you are where you are, and a lot of people just don't get that, I think. So that's really cool to hear. Listen, everyone listening, you need to go check these guys out. Black Orchid Empire. They're on social media, all social media, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Now it's all Black Orchid Empire. There's no little hids and bids. It's very easy to find, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. So I'm going to put all the links down below anyway, so you can find these guys out. Dave, I'm super excited to see what happens in the next six to 12 months for you. I feel like there's like a bit of a groundswell of a wave starting for you guys, and it's once you get over to the US, I think things are going to be really exciting for you. So, mate, I wish you all the best in the next 12 months. Thanks very much for being a part of the show today. I really appreciate it. And listen, get out there and download these guys' music. Check them out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and I'm sure you're going to love them as much as I do. Thanks very much, Dave. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tomo. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.